2023 has come and gone, so that means it's time to take a look back at the games that came out last year and come up with a list of my personal top 10 favorite games that came out in the year. Now, right off the bat, there's a few games that I didn't get to this year. Before making this list, I tried to get to all the games I wanted to, but the two big ones, I think, that I didn't get to before making this were Hogwarts Legacy and Star Wars Jedi Survivor. And for no other reason other than there's so many other games to play and I do other things with my time. So sadly, those could have made the list, but we'll never know. Maybe they'll retroactively make the list later, but for now, they're not on it. But let's start off with the honorable mentions. The first honorable mention goes to a game called Marble It Up Ultra. Now, if you ever played the game Marble Blast Ultra back in the day, it's essentially that. You're playing as a marble, you move around these big 3D levels, picking up power-ups and trying to get to the end goal. It's very Super Monkey Ball-esque. As far as I know, it's made by the same people who made that original Marble Blast Ultra, but it's an independent studio this time. They reformed and made a new game. I had a lot of fun with it, but it didn't quite make my top 10. For my next honorable mention, it is the FPS game The Finals. This game kind of came out of nowhere, although I had heard about it a couple years ago when it was in development. It's created by former Battlefield developers, and you can definitely tell when you're playing it. As a huge fan of the Battlefield franchise, I feel like it has fallen off quite significantly, especially in the past two entries. I feel there hasn't been a truly great Battlefield game since Battlefield 1, and that was 2016. But this game carries that legacy forward with a lot of former developers making it. The amount of destructibility in this feels like a true evolution of Bad Company 2 and Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 1. Where in those older games you could take down maybe small buildings, and the bigger ones you could only break down to the girders. In this game you could break down the supports and bring down entire skyscrapers if you want. But it's a team-based shooter, unlike any other that I've seen really. Its main mode is kind of like a bigger version of Domination. At first I was a little wary about it because I thought it was a battle royale, but thankfully it's not. So if you're looking for a new multiplayer shooter to play, I highly recommend giving The Finals a spin. My next honorable mention is a game called LEGO 2K Drive. Now this almost made my list, just barely didn't make it. It's essentially that game from, I think it was the early 2000s, called LEGO Racers, where you got a big open world and hundreds of unlockable LEGO cars you can drive. And on top of that, you can completely design your own LEGO cars from scratch using LEGO bricks. Honestly, that alone is worth the price of admission because it's one of the things that I spend hours on, just creating different types of cars. It's really rewarding to come up with an idea in your head for a design and then see it come to life and then be able to drive it. Unfortunately, I don't think it did too well because I think it might be coming to Game Pass and it's on a pretty steep sale, but I definitely recommend it while it's on sale. The one thing I would have liked to see, and maybe it'll be in a sequel, is having planes. Because they sort of have planes, but not really because you can kind of glide with any car, but you don't have full-on aircraft. It's a fun holdover while we wait for Traveler Tales' next main LEGO game. And for my final honorable mention before I get to my main top 10, it is a game called Under the Waves. Now this is a game made by Quantic Dream, as far as I know, but I think it might actually be a Quantic Dream side studio, because usually they don't make games this big. Under the Waves is a vast open world underwater exploration game, it's really big for being an indie game. The main crux of what you do in the game is diving in like just your normal dive suit and driving around in your submarine. You explore vast underwater facilities, you have a camera and you can take photos of different wildlife like blue whales and killer whales and sharks. You can clean up oil spills. You can collect pollution like plastic and metal to use for crafting new upgrades for your submarine. I didn't really know what to expect from it, but I found it to be quite fun. But be aware, it is pretty slow because you're underwater the whole game. So don't expect some high-octane, high-action game. And I really don't want to say anything about the story because it'll be spoilery, so I'd rather you just play it and see what it is for yourself. That does it for the list of honorable mentions, so let's jump to number 10 on my top 10. Coming in at number 10 is Trepang 2. Now this is a game I didn't really know anything about until I saw a random trailer one day. It came to PC first and then it made its way to consoles. From what I understand, it's a lot like the Fear series, which I have not played the Fear games, Fear 1, 2, and 3. I hear it's a lot like those and the SWAT games. Don't be fooled by first glances, because when you're playing it for the first several hours, it feels like sort of like a generic military shooter, but like Under the Waves, I don't want to spoil the story at all because the story takes a direction I was not expecting. The gameplay is, it's the complete opposite of Under the Waves. It's super fast paced. You have a button that lets you slow-mo at any time, which is really cool. Honestly, it's a game that feels a lot like a John Wick game because you could jump, slide, dive, dual wield basically any machine gun in the game, and grenade launchers. It's got incredible levels of destruction, not quite as much as the finals, but still a lot. And it's only $20, and it's from an indie studio, but you wouldn't really tell when you're playing it. It feels like it could be double or even AAA. So if you're a fan of the Fear games, I definitely recommend picking this one up. Coming in at number 9 is maybe an unexpected one, and that is Dead Island 2, the infamous game with the notoriously long development cycle. This game, I think, has been canceled, well, not officially canceled, but it's been rebooted, I think, 3 times with 3 different developers. So I think most people expected it to not be good, because how can it be good with that much chaos behind the scenes? Now, I remember playing Dead Island 1 way back in the day, and I didn't really expect much from this, but I got it on somewhat of a discount, and I was pleasantly surprised. Now, big caveat though, I don't recommend playing it alone. There are some bosses that are very annoying, but also I just don't think it would be nearly as fun alone, because the fun I got out of it was in co-op, and it was actually a blast. If you just want mindless, dumb zombie killing fun, then definitely pick this up. It's really focused mostly on melee combat, but there is some guns, and they aren't great, but they do the job. It's got your typical RPG elements, crafting, looting, rarities. Don't go into it expecting some kind of masterpiece. It's probably a 7 or 7.5 at best, but man, did I have a blast with it with a friend. So if you see it for even half off, I'd recommend picking that up. Number 8 is a game that came out very early in the year, I think in February, and that was Metroid Prime Remastered. Now, I've never actually played Metroid Prime up until this release of the game, and as a big fan, I only recently discovered the 2D Metroid games a couple years ago when I streamed. You can go back and watch those streams. I streamed Zero Mission, Fusion, some of Metroid 2, I think, Super Metroid, and of course Dread, and loved basically all of them. So I figured, well, there's a 3D version of Metroid out there. I heard the rumors of the remasters. We know that 4 is coming at some point, and I think they'll re-release 2 and 3 before then. So I'm like, let's see if Metroid transfers to 3D as well as it does for 2D, and yes, it does. I still think I prefer the 2D games, but man, this game's good. Of course, there's people that are familiar with this game already because it's 20 years old at this point, but I absolutely adored it. I don't think I actually got to the very end because I got stuck in one part, but I definitely will go back to it. Here's hoping Nintendo releases Metroid Prime 2 and 3 as soon as possible again on the Switch before 4. Number 7 is another old game that I'm sure a lot of you have played, even older than Metroid Prime, and that is Quake 2 Enhanced Edition. As you'll see, I got a lot of remakes on this list because a lot of them are games I haven't played before, but they had some really good remakes this year, which is usually not common. Bethesda announced the Quake 2 remaster at, I think it was E3? Or, I still call it E3, but at their showcase, Bethesda was like, hey, we're putting out Quake 2 again, remastered. I absolutely loved it. I played the Quake 1 remaster a few years back. I think this one's just as good, although I do prefer the setting of the first one, the more gothic, dark, Lovecraftian setting. This one's more generic sci-fi. Nonetheless, as a fan of boomer shooters, new and old, I had a blast with this. It's got some quality of life improvements, because I don't know if I would have gotten through the game had I played the original version, because when you get lost, and there are parts where you can get lost very easily, there's no mini-map like Doom. Doom has one, and I think it needs it. Definitely needs a map, so instead of a map, though, they gave us a waypoint system that kind of works like GTA. Now, I know that may be kind of hand-holdy and sacrilege to the hardcore Quake 2 players of old, but as a newbie to the game, I appreciated it. And it still holds up, visually. They improved some of the character models, because this is Night Dive Studios, who does some great work. They did just as good of a job here as they did on the Quake 1 remaster. So if you're a newbie to the game, or if you've played it 15 times, I still recommend picking up Quake 2 Enhanced Edition. Coming in at number 6 is Atomic Heart. Now, I struggled to figure out where to put this on the list because it was very early in the year, like Metroid. I think it was February as well on Game Pass. And the trailers were so cool for it. It looked like Bioshock. I don't think it turned out as well as we had hoped. And I think some people actually are more harsh on it than I am. I'm pretty forgiving for this game. The combat can be janky and unresponsive at times, but I think overall it works just fine. The visuals are beautiful. Like, it's a gorgeous game. But, I mean, some of the movement just feels kind of stiff and outdated. It's trying to kind of be Doom, but it's not quite fast enough to be Doom. The reason why I have this on the list, and it's not even for the gameplay, and it's for the world building. The world building here is top-notch, phenomenal. It's a bizarre game that, just like those other two games I had earlier on the list, I don't want to spoil the story, so play it for yourself, because there's some twists and turns you aren't expecting here. It's a really cool universe they've established, and this is another game that's been in development hell for, I think, over a decade, which is why it's a little disheartening that the gameplay isn't a little more sharp. I think that's the best word to describe it. It can feel a little bit sluggish. But like I said, that aside, the world building is like 10 out of 10. And that, I think, that alone actually is what holds this game, like, which is what made my list, is because of the cool world. So it doesn't have like the fluid gameplay of Bioshock, but man, they get close. And it can get frustrating at times, like when one of the final bosses I had to craft dozens of health packs. Because I wasn't fully upgraded, so I had to spam health packs in order to survive the final boss. I still recommend it, even though like it's a very, very weird game, because it tries to do everything. Like, I mean, you could see it from the trailers, it's like, how ambitious is this game? You could tell I think it actually was more ambitious, like there was feature creep, and they had to cut back a little bit, because I think it was rebooted a few times. Because you go back in those early trailers, and it looks a lot different than it does now. But they just kept adding onto it and adding onto it, adding onto it, and it feels like it does so many things. Unlike Doom, like Doom and Doom Eternal do one thing and they do it very, very well, like top of their game. That shooting is excellent. But this game is kind of the opposite, where they try to do like 5 or 6 things, and they do them all like good. Not great or excellent, but good. They do them well. Maybe I should actually learn how to speak. They do them well, trying to use proper grammar. Like I said, the best part about it is definitely the world building, which is phenomenal. I can't overstate that. If you can accept the gameplay for how it is, you'll enjoy yourself. And it's got some like weird puzzles in it too. Like they throw puzzles at you, and I don't know. It's like kind of all over the place. But it's a Russian studio. I mean, there's a lot to go in for this game. Like, I could actually probably make a full-on, like, 35-minute video. I did talk about it back when it came out, and I made a video, I think that was half an hour about it. So go back and watch that if you haven't. It's on Game Pass, so there's no reason not to try it. Alright, now we're getting down to the wire. This is number 5, and this is the Dead Space remake. And I think a lot of people, were very worried, and we were concerned that the spirit of the game would not be maintained. We were afraid, oh, don't screw this up. Dead Space is a classic. And I was very happy to discover it might actually be better than the original. Graphically, it's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, obviously it's not Visceral Games because they don't exist anymore, but this is Motive Studio, who did Star Wars Squadrons. Next, they're doing an Iron Man game, which I think could be really cool, especially after this game. Because one of the big improvements they made is the zero-G sections. Now, we all know the zero-G sections of Dead Space 1 were pretty janky and not great, where you would jump from one wall to another and stick to it. But this game adopts the version of zero-G from Dead Space 2 and 3, where you're kind of hovering like Iron Man. And they even went and got the voice actor from Dead Space 2 and 3 and gave Isaac a voice, which I at first was concerned about because a lot of people like that he's a silent protagonist. But in retrospect, I think it actually works having him have a voice this time. They changed some character models, like Nicole doesn't look anything like Nicole in the original. She looks like she could be Nicole's mother. I don't know why they made some of those choices. But overall, it's absolutely fantastic. And as a fan of these type of games, which are immersive sims is what they call it, this is one of the best. There's really very few criticisms I can give it, and I can't even think of any off the top of my head. So if you love the Dead Space games and you were begging for Dead Space 4, And if, like me, you were disappointed by the Callisto Protocol, then definitely 100% buy this. And speaking of excellent remakes, number 4 is the Resident Evil 4 remake. This is actually my first time playing this game. I have never played the original Resident Evil 4. I know, put down your torches and your pitchforks. I mean, it's a bona fide classic. But I didn't really get into Resident Evil until, I think it was 2020 or 2021, when I played the newer games. Like, I played 7, 8, and the remake of 2 and 3. So I'm pretty new to the franchise. So I figured, hey, I'll just make this my first experience of RE4, and man, was it a great one. So I can't really compare and contrast it to the original like I did with the Dead Space remake, because I played both versions of that. But from what I played here, I think it takes the great elements of RE2 remake, and obviously the RE engine now, which looks amazing. And it brings forward the more action-y elements of 4, like the kicking that Leon does. More faster-paced movement and combat, because RE2 was, to be honest, it's a much slower game. But from the people that know RE4 like the back of their hand, the original, they said they just absolutely knocked it out of the park with this one. And see it on par with the original, or maybe better. Again, maybe one day I'll go back and play the original, but my brain couldn't adjust to the weird tank controls. I don't like how you can't... I mean, I know it's like a staple. It's part of the game, like how it works in that one, but I don't like how you can't move and shoot at the same time. If you're going to move, you have to stay put. I personally don't like it. My brain was like, what? Like, it was freaking out trying to play the... Like, I did play about half an hour of the original RE4, but I put it down. I know, don't crucify me. But this game was absolutely excellent. I think it's just like Dead Space remake. It's worth it at full price. Here we go. This is number 3. And I think this is cheating a little bit, because this game, technically, the first version came out in 2022, I believe. I think it was January 2022. But this is the definitive edition, and that is Shadow Warrior 3 Definitive Edition, so it's a little bit of a cheat. Now, I played Shadow Warrior 1 and 2, the reboots by Flying Wild Hog. 1, I enjoyed the crap out of. 2, less so. I felt it was kind of weird, like they were kind of making it more, it had more RNG. The levels were kind of repetitive. Now, Shadow Warrior 3 is a more stripped down version of the first 2 games, whereas like 1 and 2 felt more open worldy. 3 feels more level-based, but man, the gameplay in 3 is so good. It's essentially a complete ripoff of Doom Eternal, and I'm not complaining because Doom Eternal is excellent. As they say, imitation is the best form of flattery, so if you're going to copy a game, you could do worse than copying Doom Eternal. I mean, it has a grappling hook, it's got really fun parkour sections that like incorporate the grappling hook that are really enjoyable. It's got arenas that you have to fight in, like in Doom Eternal, that incorporates little rings that you use to grapple to. It operates just like the shotgun or the meat hook grapple from Doom Eternal, except it's just like fixed points on the map. And of course, you can grapple into enemies. But you can use any weapon when you're doing it. And then even got finishing moves. You can take like the enemy's weapons. It gets nuts. Like, the gameplay gets extremely nuts towards the end of the game. You'll have dozens and dozens of enemies you got to take out. This is honestly some of the most fun I've had this year was in this game. And it's still got the fun writing that the first 2 has. Is it Hoji? The mask guy from the first one comes back in this one. He's still really funny. I'm telling you, Flying Wild Hog, they're a studio to watch. They made this trilogy. I think they're done with it for now. I'm currently playing Evil West, finally, when it came out in 2022, which I've been looking forward to playing. That's them as well, so they make some cool stuff. I still think double A games would describe them, but they're getting real close to triple A, especially with Shadow Warrior 3. So definitely pick that up. I think it might still be on Game Pass, and that's how I played it. We are down to the penultimate pick for the top 10 games of the year, and that would be, number 2, is Warhammer 40k Boltgun. First of all, you should know that I know absolutely nothing about Warhammer. I went into this completely blind. I'm not into the fandom or like the franchise. The only thing that drew me in was that teaser. I think it was last, like 2021 or 2, I can't remember. They had a teaser for this game, And it showed off that it's essentially Doom in the Warhammer universe. Now, if it's a boomer shooter, you automatically have my attention because I played many of them every year. Especially all the new ones that are coming out, because you have this new wave of boomer shooters that I just adore. And speaking of that, one game that probably would have topped my list had I got to play it, and that's Turbo Overkill. Man, I wanted to play that. I couldn't get it because I don't have a PC right now. It was supposed to come out last year, but that didn't happen. So I probably guarantee that when I get to play that, that'll retroactively become my best game of 2023 because that's when it originally released. That happens sometimes where I get to a game late and then I'm like, oh, this was actually my favorite game of that year. But Boltgun was just an absolute blast for, I think it was 20 or 25 hours. Like, it's a pretty good length for a boomer shooter. The levels are really big, like expansive. It's a developer, I think it's called Auroch Digital. I've never heard of them. I think this might be their first game. And if that's the case, bravo. It's so much fun. And they got, like, obviously the best boomer shooters. The heart of them are the weapons. You got to have a good selection of weapons. And thankfully, this has them in droves. I think it's got like 10 different weapons. And you stomp around as an Ultramarine. And like I said, I know my knowledge for this franchise now extends to only this game and Darktide, which I played, but that did not make my list. And this game gets kind of nuts too towards the end. Like, some of the bosses are pretty difficult, and I played on normal difficulty, and you got to be picking up armor and health packs like crazy if you want to survive. But there's nothing more satisfying in this game than using the heavy bolter. That thing sounds incredible. So as a noob to the franchise, just for the sheer fact that it's a modern boomer shooter, it didn't matter that I wasn't familiar with the IP. The story is pretty thin, like most boomer shooters. Story doesn't matter whatsoever, but man, did I have a blast. So that is my number 2. And now we come down to number 1. My favorite game of 2023 is a game I finished literally today, earlier before recording this. And it's a game that I didn't expect to be this good because of this company's previous track record. And that is RoboCop Rogue City. Man, what a great game this was. So this is from the developer Teyon, and they are infamous for their completely terrible Rambo game from about, I think it was like 10 years ago. That Rambo game is completely awful, and it's kind of a miracle that Teyon didn't go bankrupt after that. But this game this is living proof, that a studio can start from humble beginnings and make something bad, and they can learn and grow and make something great. Because when I started playing this like about a week ago, I was like, I think I'm going to like this. I don't think it's going to make my top 10. Because I heard mixed things. I heard like a lot of 7s. I was getting 7s and 8s at most. People were saying it's kind of janky, but even with the jank, it's great. And they were right. And I'm kind of a relatively new fan of RoboCop. I only watched the original RoboCop for the first time last year, believe it or not. And then earlier this year, I watched 2 and 3 for the first time, and even the 2014 reboot, which wasn't as good. 3 was pretty bad, too. So luckily, this game is a direct sequel to 2. They kind of ignore 3, although there is a reference to the fact that OCP is about to be bought by a Japanese company, which happens in 3. And Teyon kind of proved themselves a little bit after the failure of Rambo with Terminator Resistance that came out, I think, in 2020. So they have made a game before this and after Rambo. And people were like, it's alright. It was like a 7. And it was called like the best Terminator anything since T2, which is a big accomplishment because basically all the movies since 2 have been crap. That's a game that I haven't completed yet. I got pretty far in, but then I got stuck and annoyed with how many Terminators were trying to kill me. And then the definitive edition came out. So I'm going to actually, or enhance, whatever it's called. They re-released it. So now I'm going to actually start over on that version. After playing this great game, I think I deserve to give them some more cash. Because clearly, I think they started off as a really small studio, and they must be growing because it feels like each one of their games is getting better and better. And so this game, yeah, the character models aren't great. They're kind of stiff. There's repeated character models in the game. You could see characters with the same face. The lip syncing isn't great. Some of the audio isn't great. Like, it's low audio for some lines, while some lines are really loud. Some of it feels a little amateurish, but man, did they nail the atmosphere of RoboCop. Like, you have to give it to them. Round of applause for absolutely nailing the look of the first two films and the atmosphere of Detroit. Now, because it's still technically a double A game, I think, technically, it's not quite on the scale you would want it to be. Like, you can't drive around in your car, which is a little disappointing. But it doesn't really matter. Like, it feels like a full-on RPG. Like, you're going around and helping a lot of people. You have actual detective work, like scanning stuff. Like, it feels like you're playing a Batman game at times. Or even L.A. Noire. They 100% nailed the gameplay for RoboCop, because I was wondering when this was announced, I was like, how are you going to make it interesting to play as RoboCop? Because he walks slow, he's like a walking tank. You can't really sprint, I don't think. It's a lot different than your usual FPS, which is, especially ones that I like, which are fast-paced. Like, it's the complete opposite of something like Shadow Warrior 3, where you're moving nonstop, or Doom Eternal. And yet, it's my favorite FPS game of the year. Because they nailed what it feels like to be RoboCop, which is, yeah, you're slow, but you can deflect tons of bullets. You can bounce bullets off of special panels on the walls, like he does in the movie, where he like shoots people from behind by bouncing it off the wall. You got your melee with the spike on it. You got a boost. You don't have sprint, but you do have like a little dash. And then you got to heal yourself all the time with recharge or OCP recharges. And I was kind of surprised with how many weapons are in this game. Like, yeah, your main weapon that you use all the time, and it's also the most satisfying, is your Auto 9, your automatic pistol. But I was kind of shocked every time I pick up a new weapon and see more. I'm like, man, another new weapon, another new weapon. I think there was at least a dozen, maybe even more, maybe even 15 or 20. And like the dated face models, the gun models are a little bit dated. It looks like a game that came out 10 years ago. But it doesn't matter because the gameplay is a blast. It's almost like they used the RoboCop IP because you move slowly and stuff. They used that to their advantage because he moves slow already, and like if they can't nail the movement, it kind of doesn't matter because you're RoboCop and you move slow. But yeah, all the guns don't have much animation to them, and the animation they do have isn't very smooth. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's about 20 hours. I think it took me like nearly 20 hours to finish, and I was going through it slowly and meticulously with a fine-tooth comb, doing every side quest I could find. And I won't spoil it, but the ending I did not see coming. That was really cool. And honestly, after finishing it, to me, this is the definitive, this is like the real RoboCop 3. Screw the original RoboCop 3. We now have essentially 3 RoboCops with Peter Weller, and that's awesome. So this will go right up next to RoboCop 1 and 2 for me in my collection. Of course, we all wanted that Neil Blomkamp RoboCop Returns. I would love to hear what he thinks of this game. Like, I'd love to hear, like, maybe even see him stream it, because it probably doesn't use any of the ideas he had. I'm not going to say anything about the story, just play it yourself, so I won't spoil it. But it's a really cool story, better than the RoboCop 3 story, of course. Probably, like Terminator 2, it's probably the best thing for this franchise since RoboCop 2. Yeah, there's been comics, but there's not been a lot. The reboot was fine. But yeah, I mean, I can't really stop gushing about it. It's fantastic. Little quibbles here and there that I have with it. Even with those little problems, it still overcomes them. Like, even though it's my favorite game of the year, I still don't think it's a 10, though. It's close, though. It's probably at least a 9. Like, the fact that I'm giving this game, I did not expect a Teon game to get Game of the Year over something like RE4 Remake. Like, the gameplay is so much, like, cleaner and sharper in RE4, but just something about RoboCop, even with its jank, it's just so good. So, yeah, definitely pick it up. I think it's on sale now, but it's definitely worth full price. And I'm hoping they make a sequel. I hope Teon... I know this is officially their best-selling game. I hope this makes them hire more people and just improve with each game. They could get better face animators, better audio and VO. I think they should definitely, because it's definitely a talented team. So I hope they grow and grow and grow. And I would love to see, because they keep making these 80s games, if they don't make a sequel to this, like if they make a sequel, they honestly just do what you did with this one, but bigger and better, and I mean, it looks excellent. It's Unreal Engine 5, I think. Um, but just make the map bigger, more of Detroit, let you drive around. That's really the only improvements you can make, I think. Maybe longer, like twice as long. Um, Peter Weller's also great in it. Like, he's like 80 now or something, but he's still got it for the voice of RoboCop. So it's cool he got to play him probably for his last time in such a cool project. So glad he agreed to it. But so if they don't make a sequel to this, I would like a RoboCop versus Terminator game because they've already made a Terminator game. And if not that, a Dread game. Although that might feel a little bit too similar to this, I don't know. But I still would like. I would love a Dread game from them, with get Carl Urban to voice him, and maybe use the script from the sequels that didn't happen. That'd be cool. I'd really like to see that. Yeah, hit up Carl Urban and ask him if he would do that because that'd be awesome. And then if not that, I think maybe an Aliens game. I don't know. They could possibly do it if they get more money in a bigger team. But on the other idea I had was a Die Hard game. They could make a cool Die Hard game. Or I think they could take another crack at Rambo. Try again with Rambo. Now that you spent a decade learning how to make games, clearly, you know what you're doing now. So, bravo, Taeyeon. And yes, that is my list for 2023. My top 10 plus 4 honorable mentions. It was overall a really good year for games. Like, I think the best year in several years. It had a ton, and there was a lot more that I didn't get to. Like I said, there was Hogwarts Legacy and Jedi Survivor would have probably made this list, but I just didn't get to them. There's way too many. And then I think this year might be the opposite. I think this year's going to be a slow year because everything is in development still. And I had several AA games on this list, and I think AA games might be making a comeback because AAA games just cost so freaking much and take so freaking long that we need to have a middle ground. So bring back the AA game. So yeah, that'll about do it for my list. Leave in the comments what you thought of my list and leave your own list in the comments. And we'll see. I might do a list of most anticipated games this year, but I don't think we know about enough of them this year. So yeah, other than that, leave a like, subscribe, share, and I will see you next time. Peace out.